The Fortnite storyline has quickly become incredibly complex. From characters, comics, and live events, this is the entire Fortnite storyline explained. An orb of energy implodes on itself, and in a plume of pure existence, an infinite amount of universes are created. But there's one special reality in particular, called Reality Zero. This is the reality that protects the Omniverse core, better known as the 0 point, and it consists of 2 islands enclosed on top of each other. And when anyone is teleported to these islands, their memory is wiped, everything that they do is reset, and they are continuously playing through a 22-minute loop. If someone enters the island just by traveling to it, no teleporting involved, these effects don't seem to often take place. Anyways, back to the concept of the loop. A storm encloses on these players as they fight each other to the death. But don't worry, they reset, they respawn. This is all done so that the invaders are more focused on constantly fighting with each other, rather than what they really came for, being the 0 point's ultimate omniversal power. It acts as a gateway between infinite amounts of reality. Now there is actually a way to escape this loop. You have to be the last one standing at the exact center of the storm. But if and when you complete that process, there is always a version of you that stays within the loop. There is also a version of you now on an island with no loop, the real version. A replica of the exact same place, yet it doesn't reset, you can remember literally everything, and there's no storm. The bad thing is, once you escape onto the non-looped island, you can't just respawn, you can actually die. Let's just get back to this idea of that version that stays with you in the loop. This concept is called snapshots, and it's what allows this guy to have like 1,000 different versions of himself running around. This is Jones, and every single mission that he's gone on involving the loop left an updated version of himself behind. You'll learn more about him later. There are also ways to outstand this loop and resist it. These sort of resistant devices consist of airtight suits, dark metal visors, and portal devices, which all allow people to enter the loop, keeping their ability to talk and remember things. They're pretty overpowered. So yeah, sure, the loop is quite powerful, but these resistant devices alongside bright minds can often find many ways to outsmart the 0 point abilities. Exhibit A, Geno. When someone escapes the loop, they are still on the island, but as we now know, they can talk and remember things and do whatever they originally aimed to do when approaching the island. The first and only person to ever successfully do that and take control was a man known as Geno. His goal is to find and create the perfect civilization of people through the use of the 0 point's reality linking, and he happened to find many other uses for it as well. He also used it just for its energy in science, where he learnt to become extremely skilled within genetics and studies of DNA, and later offering himself the ability to never grow old. When Geno had his own children, he longed for them to be perfect, so he modified them to be exactly that way. The man then sent both of his daughters into the loop, because they're perfect, they should be smart and escape super quickly, right? No, they took a fair bit, and that still wasn't good enough. When they escaped, Geno grabbed their snapshots that were used to constantly fighting, and simply replaced the girls he raised for people that fought better. See, great guy, right? He also worked alongside main antagonists such as Sloane in the Imagined Order, who had the same goals as Geno, seeing he founded the organization. Members such as Sloane do take orders from Geno, and as we mentioned earlier, Jones, who now left Geno, used to work for them too. The only problem is, he kept immortality from working with the Imagined Order whilst his family didn't. He had to stay his age watching them all die along the way. Yeah, well there's more unpleasant stuff too. Dr. Sloane, being the character who we just mentioned, seems to have quite some deep lore with the Foundation, the leader of the Seven. The Foundation is a man who clearly used to work with the Imagined Order, as he has many details on their organization, as well as strong past relationships with many employees. But unlike the organization, he's a decent person, faced and voice acted by The Rock. Anyways, the Foundation doesn't have any unfinished business with those psychopaths anymore, as he leaves to create a group known as the Seven. The Seven consists of 7 members. I know, it's shocking. These members are the Foundation, the Visitor, the Scientist, the Paradigm, the Origin, the Imagined, and the Order. The Imagined and the Order are the daughters of Geno, who joined the Seven after their father left them. Damn. Now that we've got almost all the main characters out of the way, let's finish off with the Elemental Beings. The Elemental Beings consist of 5 main members: Ice King, Fire King, Cube Queen, and then a King or Queen of Air, and also a King or Queen of Earth. We don't know too much about the other members as of yet. Here's what we do know. The elements will only ever have one main gender role. For example, there is a Cube King, yet the Cube Queen is more powerful, so she's the main representing monarch of the cubes. The Cube King is actually the origin from the Seven, and he joined their group after leaving the Cube Queen and escaping an IO prison because he realized how awful all of it was. The main elemental goal was to trap the 0 Point's dangerous beings from the infinite loop of creation and instead preserve them to make the 0 Point's creation safer for mankind. The Ice King often did this by freezing objects within ice, but once the Fire King realized that he wanted to make use out of this collection, rather than just trapping them in. The Ice King understood how dangerous this could be, so he took possessions alongside his team and his moon, yes, he owned an entire moon, and he took it all to Reality Zero, home of the 0 Point. Why on earth would he think that that was a good idea? Well, an extremely well-protected area, seeing no one there had any clue of what they were doing other than fighting aimlessly for 22 minutes, it was a pretty good idea seeing no one could attack it as they had no idea of what they were doing. Now, we're at the point where the game actually starts. The elementals are sat just outside reality, Geno and the Imagined Order click their plan into full overdrive, and the loop alongside the storm are making for one of the most loved games of 2018. Welcome to Fortnite Battle Royale. You jump on a bright blue battle bus, and you continuously play through the same island, and you're all doing it exactly how the Imagined Order planned for you to. Players in the loop were creating a perfect distraction. Anyone who approached the 0 Point would just be thrown in with a bunch of loopers, no memory, or at least that's what Geno assumed. The loop was going according to plan, until suddenly an overhaul of meteors hit the island at random times. At first, this just seems like a natural disaster like anything else, but that theory was so off because these things couldn't have been any less natural. The meteors weren't random occurrences at all, they were actually a way for an outer world group to travel through. That's right, get ready to meet our first one of the Seven's members, the Visitor. The Visitor's meteor lands on the island. This allowed him to set up camp in reality, but it also destroyed many of the island's main attractions. The one that took everyone's attention was Risky Reels, which was a movie theater, now absolutely wrecked by this disaster. Now, the Visitor used the meteor to travel to the island, as well as accidentally destroying a few towns, but how did he get here with an idea of what to do? Well, earlier I mentioned the concept of loop resistance. One of the devices that allows you to outstand the loop's effects and talk in it is an airtight suit. And surprise surprise, the Seven absolutely love using these things. It's actually the core of their design. Anyways, back to the movie theater. It is completely destroyed by the meteor crash, and the islanders want to rebuild and open it with a fun event. A film begins being produced that is ready to premiere on the day of reopening the destroyed cinema. One of the main props from the reopening film is actually a rocket, and the Visitor sees this as his only way out, so he tries to use the energy from his meteor to make it actually work, and yeah, he succeeds pretty easily. At this point in the story, the Imagined Order don't properly understand anything that they're dealing with. Sure, they've had control over the island for a good while, but there's still so many questions to be answered, and here's our first answer. What are rifts? You've probably seen them in Fortnite several times, but what even are they? Rifts are fractures in the fabric of all reality and time. There are two types of rifts. Sideways rifts are one of them, and these are just rifts created not directly by the 0 Point, just by its creation energy. The other type are pure portals, which string directly from the 0 Point itself. There are various devices that can be used to allocate locations to these portals, and the Visitor uses one of them to set his rocket to transport into a rift which sends him back to where he came from. He does this with the use of the energy he applied to the prop rocket that leaves a rift behind, answering another one of our questions. How do rifts close? For a rift to close, it has to be closed from both ends. That usually happens by something entering in both ways. More on that later. For now, the crack in the sky remains, and as the Imagined Order don't know what the hell to do about it, it expands its energy across the island, creating a ton of smaller scale rifts, which reach into random realities and pull people towards the island. The first example of this is Drift. Drift is actually a man from our Earth, and he was drifted into Reality Zero with all of this havoc going on. He begins to meet the other islanders, presumably outside of the loop, and they take a road trip around the place to introduce Drift and make him feel at home. But this kinda has the exact opposite effect, as on the journey, they come across a threat of pure dark matter to threaten all existence. That's right, remember the elementals? Yeah, well, one of them, being the Cube Queen of Darkness, sends her cube through the crack in the sky to corrupt and destroy the island. But hey, an object needs to enter a rift both ways to close, right? So maybe this was an act of savior to close the rift. Yeah, maybe not. It does close the rift, but the Cube Queen is the leader of the last reality, and they are an army of avid cubes and extraterrestrial beings looking to corrupt all worlds. So this was an attack through a rift due to the island's rift vulnerability. But why would they attack with darkness cubes? What even are they, and how are these cubes significant? We can assume that these cubes are actually part of the Omniverse elemental collection, and they were preserved, yet the Cube Queen abused them for her own goals and goods. Their purpose is to reach realities, spread, and build upon each other, as you will see later. The cube begins to corrupt areas as well as people, and the Imagined Order immediately take action. They send in an offense unit known as the Enforcers to restore balance and order to all reality against darkness. But that pretty quickly fails, and the dark energy makes its way to the center of the island, leaving runes on the island as it does so. Eventually it reaches its final destination. In the lake above the 0 point, it sinks in and infects all of the water. It's all part of a plan for the last reality, and it'll all make sense later too. For now, the cube sits beneath the lake, and that lasts about 2 days until it rises up again. The land surrounding the water is taken up in the air with the cube at its base. The cube was only charging itself up, and it certainly wasn't finished what it had started. The runes of the darkness had spread across the island are revisited by the cube itself, and it is all channeled up to channel maximum energy. Since the cube technically isn't corrupting anything at that moment, the IO take the chance to learn more about the rift in an underground bunker while they have time, and although they don't learn much, it gives them something to do, but immediately the attention is set back on the corruption, as the cube begins to make its way to the center of the island once again. In a strike at the sky, a portal begins to brew, and the dark energy attempts to summon the rest of the last reality. Now, this is just a fraction of dark energy, and whilst it never really opens a massive crack in the sky allowing for the entire army to take their attack, it still brings a good chunk of creatures and enemies. But of course, for the last reality, this is far from enough. The cube's effort have been immense. In a plume of eruption, the thing kinda implodes on itself. Weird, right? This energy is so incredibly threatening, and it startles the entire of reality. The loopers are then transported to the reality junction. Here we see gateways to every single reality in all existence. Crazy, right? If you thought that was crazy, this is actually where we're introduced to the 0 point. A rift butterfly approaches us, teleporting everyone back to the island, which has now been healed, as only a few cube shards remain. This gives off the vibe that this rift butterfly creature alongside the 0 point energy is almost alive, but that's not the only reality startling effect. Reality is set into a cosmic storm. Remember how the elemental moon was sat just outside of reality 0 for its safety? Yeah, well, this cosmic shakeup doesn't treat it too nicely. A shard of cold rock is torn off, and it falls into the oceans of the Fortnite island. Upon impact, it crashes right into the mainland, with a fleet ready for an attack, and as a raid takes place, the Fire King awakens, realizing what has happened. If you don't remember, the Ice King froze over all of his knights and his treasures as part of the collection to keep them preserved for the better of the Omniverse. What he didn't realize was that freezing a fire god in ice isn't going to do anything. As the heat builds from the escaped prisoner of the Fire King, the Ice King comes up with a big plan. 2 elements are stronger than 1. So he makes his way to the center of the island, takes some of the remaining dark cube shard, and he uses it to create dark ice fiends as well as various other shard enemies. Alongside this, he sets the island under eternal ice storm. The Fire King realizes what he's gotten himself into, and with the Ice King having an entire castle, he needs a home base for his needs too, and as the island undergoes serious earthquakes, a volcano is summoned to existence. The Fire King steals dangerous beings from the Ice King's castle to use as his own assistants in war, and as the battle is set into full gear, a new test is brought upon these godlike beings. From what the island has seen so far, the Cube Queen, Ice King, Fire King, they all want their element to prevail. This is just an observation that needs to be tested, so a game of greed is set right into play. Various Aztec treasures are revealed from beneath the island, and immediately each elemental faction takes their shot. This test quite quickly reveals their hate and greed against one another, and these selfish characters are soon punished with a curse. Those who abuse wealth and power are then cursed with a skeletal figured body, which is what happens to both Oro and Blackheart. But of course this treasure isn't the real prize, and as we know, the real goal is actually the 0 point. So this definitely seems to just be some sort of test. Now, with godlike beings on the island that are aware of the power nearby, protection is immediately needed, and an agent of the Imagined Order known as the Singularity is given that exact role. She enters a protective vault beneath the island. She guards the 0 point. Now, quickly after, the IO begin to dig up this vault, The reasoning for this evacuation is unclear, but we can assume it is because they needed the energy due to later evidence. The ice versus fire dispute comes to its final climax, as the Fire King is frozen within the island's oceans, though we're still in massive danger as there's a volcano about to erupt, and the core of the Omniverse itself is being dug up by a dangerous organization run by Geno. We enter the protective vault to survive the volcano's attack. Many others don't make it, and enter smaller bunkers around the island. The magma rock hits many part of the island's locations, including the Polar Peak Ice Castle. The main vaults open, and it is revealed that the island has been hit badly. Some of the smaller bunkers don't open, and many are even stuck in really confined spaces, such as Jones. Remember him? Yeah, well I promise he'll be important soon, but back to the destruction for now. The Singularity, remember the IO agent, rebuilds everything that she can, and since she's part of IO, she uses the 0-point power to repair all of the tech. With everything going on, the Seven start to set their attention back on Reality Zero. The island is not normal at all. Jones is locked away with the realization that everything connects together. He begins to see hints of things happening in the past and the future, like it's all way too predictable. Like a hint that time is breaking down yet again, he foresees an unforgettable battle, reality threatening, Omniverse threatening. The Imagined Order get ready to eliminate this new threat with a massive doomsday device. But the Paradigm, a member of the Seven, comes in and tries to alter their thoughts, and it works. She agrees to work in collaboration with Singularity to create a mech strong enough to defeat the island's threat of the Devourer monster in the Ice Castle, which was awoken when the volcanic rock hit the Ice Castle, and it's one of the collected reality threats. The mech is built, and the Paradigm kicks their plan into gear, defeating the monster for all it's worth. And yet again, the plan diverts to abusing the power of the 0-point. The Paradigm leaves in the mech. With small amounts of energy, it crashes right onto the ice moon nearby, where the Ice King has now returned to, attempting to freeze himself again. Anyways, at least for now that's settled, but nope, it sure isn't. The visions that Jones's bunker snapshot has had are correct. This is a threat to existence at all time. With the 0-point exposed in its use for power, the Seven realize that this is the Paradigm's mech's fault, and reality cannot stay like this, it must be ended the right way. With the use of sideways rifts, the Seven recommence old threat to the island, which they combine in a plan of destruction. The meteor, the cube, the Seven's rocket, they all see their return, and as objects implode onto the 0-point, the island is completely torn apart as it needs to be. With the 0-point in need of protection from the island, it does everything it can to reform what is left. The matter is then divided into two, and both sides are set right into place, protecting the core at all costs. Since it's the center of everything, each action completed by the 0-point can attract any greedy monstrosity, and surprise surprise, it happens once more. Unwanted attention begins to make its way over to the island, but not for a little while. One of the two rearranged islands begins to be where the island's loop is set up once more. The Seven set up camp on the other side known as Artemis. And with the two factions now opposing one another, Geno sets out a scout team known as Ego onto the new world. The opposing faction is known as Alter. In a war between these two sides, many fighters begin to see that the soldiers' identities are corrupted, and they don't seem to be lining up. Their representations show that this fight really has no loyalty, and this war might even be a setup. Soon it is fully discovered that these people are assets being used by the Imagined Order for things their own employees don't even agree with. A retaliation takes place by a man known as Midas. He is currently working in IO's Doomsday Division. He used to run a crime organization known as Shadow with the Chaos Agent, who is Alter's head operator. As he is friends or past allies with this leader, he takes control of the two factions, changing them to be Ghost and Shadow. These two differed sides really confuse the Imagined Order, as they fight with an alliance once more. These agents have fooled everyone. With a battle as a distraction, Midas works on his true rebellion against his former work of the Imagined Order. He acquires the help of his daughter Jules. She is a mechanical engineer that operates on building a device strong enough to fully break the storm as well as the loop itself. But this device isn't the only thing that he's hiding. He actually has a secret link to a character known as Oro, who was a greed victim from Season 8, as we think. Keep in mind this guy has also acquired the Golden Touch. The answer to that we're not quite sure on. And even now he's confusing us. The man is doing a perfect job of playing off his final plan with his distraction concepts, and as it all unfolds, the device is finally started up. The sirens go off and the fight begins. As the storm is pushed back, it breaks the loop as expected, and we're slightly transported to the bridge, which is the area between the two islands where the IO operate on. Jones is just doing his reality altering jobs when he sees us and is completely shocked. He doesn't understand what he's seeing. How did we escape? And it is here that we realize that the IO don't even fully understand what they're dealing with, and neither does Midas. He's fighting against a sentient storm of pure life, and it fights straight back, sending us right into the loop once more. The storm uses its wide access and area to reach far across the island, raising the water and flooding the entire place. It is alive and ready to fight back alongside the 0 point. But since we're all memory-wiping idiots, we forget that in the next 22 minutes, it's summer, there's lots of water, so instead of fixing literal hell, we just kinda decide to party. Midas is thrown into the loop by the storm, and with no one even variously aware of these multiple issues, the unwanted attention from all the way back at the end of Chapter 1 is revealed as Galactus from the Marvel Universe. Galactus was actually looking across the Omniverse for 5 planets of power. When he came across the central power of existence, he was a lot more interested in that, which was the 0 point. Thor from the Marvel Universe knew how much of a threat he could pose, but as he teleported himself to the Fortnite Island to warn loopers of what was to come, he began to lose his memory. Other heroes came in defense, and they retained their emotion and relationships to successfully escape the loop and prepare for battle whilst working together. Iron Man is one of these various allies assisting Thor, and with his ideas, alongside various skills from outsmarting the 0 point, he manipulates the loop to create looper remakes of battle buses that we see in the game. He overloads them with gamma cell energy from the Marvel Universe, as well as bringing his entire industry to the island with Rift devices. Anyways, remember Midas? His link to Oro is revealed to be the undead curse, and his power over death and life allows him to resurrect himself without dying. This is where the story gets a little random, but it does answer some really big questions. He stops the loop and allows loopers to not respawn, but instead they die, and then they're resurrected as beings of darkness. Again, I know it sort of just shows up, but Epic had to answer our questions at some point. Is this Midas, or is this just another multiversal version? Not sure, but back to Marvel, where our fight against Galactus goes successfully, and we rift him back to where he came from. He's a massive sentient god, so although we did beat him, he's still really stuffed over the 0 point with like a touch of a single finger. Due to the events of Galactus' arrival, the 0 point is incredibly unstable. The Imagined Order send in Jones to gather hunters across reality that can protect the 0 point with a loop resistant, the portal device, which is what allows him to gather these powerful beings. Whilst completing this process, he links multiple realities to the 0 point directly, which itself and the Imagined Order cannot handle, so they simply do absolutely nothing about it. When Jones then realizes that this is his organization and they couldn't care less about him, he goes to contact their opponent, the Seven. Yet upon that attempt of communication, he is fired from the Imagined Order, and he goes completely rogue. They're just not helping at all. He spends a few weeks gathering intel on the Seven, and he sets the coordinates of his portal device to the location of the Foundation, who is the leader of the Seven. Upon activating this reality mechanism through the 0 point, the Seven's bulky leader is brought down in a massive meteor. Due to the hatred between the Imagined Order and the Seven, Foundation immediately attacks Jones upon seeing him, until Jones strikes a deal that if he is helped to heal the 0 point, the location of Geno will be revealed. As a likely ex-ally of Geno, the Foundation absolutely hates the man, and will do anything to hunt him down. Due to these lucky circumstances, the agreement is then settled. The Foundation assists Jones in closing off the links to these various realities, and with the 0 point now decaying only due to itself, it needs to be directly healed. It is beaming at reality waves, altering existence by the second. Foundation's only choice is to work with the 0 point, in a protection method known as the Spire. The Spire is a tower that the 0 point uses as a form of protection. It is absolutely overwhelmed with corruptive energy, and anyone who goes near it has their weaknesses exploited and their life completely ripped apart. This is done likely so that people are scared of it, and in effect, they stay far away. Just let the goddamn thing heal. Of course, the idea is that no one goes near the 0 point because it surrounded itself with literal corruption, but some are greedy for the dark energy it holds, and they don't care if it destroys their entire life either. Exhibit A. Raz. Raz is actually a thief, for all his life felt like he was called upon by dark energy as well as the Spire itself. The main object he longed to take for himself was a Dark Spire artifact, and with a massive spire right in the center of the island, Reality Zero was the perfect place for him to get that, so he goes around seeking to reach the Spire's inner sanctum, which he does, corrupting his body with dark energy and other worldly abilities. Soon Raz's little fulfilled fantasies would be the main attraction for the last reality as well as the Cube Queen due to the abuse of the dark element as well as its magic. All that we've seen of the last reality before is some lackluster mini cube. Whilst we thought we were dealing with geometric shapes, it turns out we've got a flock of extraterrestrial UFOs and armies. The invasion begins as a giant mothership makes its way through the island's rim. They are not loot because they didn't teleport here, and instead they just kinda showed up. Their first action against us is the destruction of the Spire. so it seems like they didn't want us to get our hands on its abilities. Dr. Sloan is frightened by these enemies, and with the imagined order completely falling apart, she hires us as an undercover agent to work with her. Now, despite the initial abduction threat and everyone's initial terrifying thoughts, the aliens begin to seem innocent, and they throw a summer party with the islanders to celebrate their arrival. But of course, this is all just a setup. The imagined order take a break from the war with the arrival of the party, and they investigate enemies within rather than those of the last reality. It is revealed that the reason their organization was falling apart is because there is an imposter within the IO who was working with Jones on his betrayal. The Order are very suspicious of him, and they imprison Jones within a cell between the islands. The imposters are suspected to be two characters. They are then investigated, and it is actually revealed to be Maven. She was offering information to the last reality about the loop as well as the imagined order. Whilst they're distracted with these imposters and still trying to figure out what to do with them, the last reality begin to abduct multiple of the island's main locations, and they hold a concert to continue the party, still tricking many of the islanders into the belief that they mean absolutely no harm whilst they still do. Within the concert, they take loopers through a puzzling experience of reality travel, but in the whole truth of it, they're actually seeing how we react to these different locations, scanning the results and the 0 point to try to figure out where we came from, and just trying to figure out more about the loop, us, and everything. The enemy is advanced, and the IO need to retaliate, so they begin to study the last reality's movements, and they realize where they're going to abduct next. They begin to place bombs in that exact facility, and upon the abduction, the bombs are lifted within the alien mothership. The mothership is entered and hacked, replacing the alien energy with IO-controlled mechanisms. The bombs are in and ready to be detonated, when the last reality then take their attack, and it is the cube. Dark energy takes over the ship once more, and Sloan forces it off. Ultimately, with the cube out of all power and life, we use our blue 0 point creation energy to fuel it to life once more. So thanks for us for reviving it, it takes us out of the main ship to the upper sector, where we see thousands of other cubes. The mothership then explodes, and the cubes fall out onto the island. The last reality have their moment, and the bombing has officially gone haywire. With the cubes taking their shot at war, a new team arises known in the war effort, in order to stop the last reality. With multiple attempts at funding weaponry and building up new locations, it does not work, and the Cube Queen who's behind all of this reveals herself to strand the final attack. Hell is unleashed, and a pyramid forms at the center of the island with hundreds of cubes building on top of each other. The Cube Queen successfully creates a summoning shield that will allow her to bring in her full army. With dark energy charging up, the war effort are ready to fight with the loopers. It didn't take long for this anticipated threat to show what she's made of, and the N goes down once more to finish off our time on this island. The revived cube from the mothership attack does its part, and in an attempt to protect all of the army, it is destroyed by the last reality. The Seven come to rescue the island from hell with a plan to take everyone to the flip side of the island. Foundation rescues Jones from the prison, the loopers are then taken underground, and once everything's in place, the island is flipped. The Cube Queen is forced into the water where the island rotates, and as the portal slowly weakens, she and her army are forced out of Reality Zero. The island flips, hell is below us, and it's now time for a new beginning. This new island is seemingly peaceful. There are statues, sanctuaries, and it is actually revealed to be the home of the Seven. Well, that is until the Imagined Order begin to drill through the island and make their stand on the flip side. The Seven are sick and tired of this back and forth action, and both factions call upon a full-fledged war, but the Seven aren't ready. They don't have all of their members of their group. They're still missing the Paradigm, the Origin, as well as the Sisters, so an initiative begins to get back the Paradigm. Many members don't agree with this, as the Paradigm did work with the Imagined Order a while back, which, considering the circumstances of the war, is a very controversial move to make. In an attempt to find this member, it is uncovered that she is quite possibly dead on the ice moon from when her mech crash landed there. The scientist persists in contacting her, but despite the effort, nothing works. Instead, the Origin comes in for assistance, as well as the Sisters, who return to the Seven to assist in the war, as well as the fact that they want to get Paradigm back, and they want their memories back, despite how dark it may have all been. The Imagined Order retaliate to the Seven, back and forth yet again, by claiming various of the island's locations, but as mentioned earlier, the Seven want to take a final stand and end it. Something needs to be done to take down the Imagined Order for good, so both factions begin planning for the final strand. The Seven have all their members back except the Paradigm, and while she isn't much of use in their plan, her mech most definitely is. The Seven make their way to the ice moon and find that the Paradigm had somehow managed to survive in the cold winds. The mech is barely intact and it's completely out of power. Whilst the Seven search the ice moon, they come across the Ice King and another one of his castles. He is shocked that they've been able to make it in, and he understands that they are extremely powerful to reach his throne. He sees that they may even be a threat to the Omniverse with this power and how far they've come, and as he attempts to freeze them as part of his collection. They quickly escape, and the focus is set back on powering the mech. The most effective use of doing this is to use a shard of the 0 point itself, so they hunt one down and retrieve it to the mech, powering it up, and refurbishing it with new parts of designs and features. Meanwhile, the Imagined Order work on a Doomsday device that creates maximum strong energy for their weaponry. Over time, the Doomsday device continues to power up, and the final battle is ready to commence. The island is approached, and both sides are ready to attack with full force. With all the Seven's preparation, it still doesn't seem like they're winning, as the Imagined Order leader, Geno, is actually here to fight. His daughters, the Imagined and the Order, deal with him for the time being, whilst the rest of the Seven deal with their traps that the enemy set up surrounding the device. And as the mech falls through the ground in a trap set up by IO, everything seems to be failing. The main battle, which is now underground, sees Jones walking with the team towards Sloan. Although the mech is on low power, it still manages to raise its arm, and Paradigm crushes Sloan beneath the mech's hand. With Sloan gone, and all of the Imagined Order forces fought off beneath ground, the only one left to deal with is Geno. A broken up form of the man appears in the 0 point visibly, and the Foundation alongside Jones make their way through to Geno, and he's surprisingly dealt with already, at least for the time being. It turns out that when Geno and his daughter both fell into the 0 point, they began to be torn apart, having every part of their body split to a different reality of the Omniverse, as per what happens to anyone who faces this same fate. As Foundation and Jones watch these two die out, it's no true end for Geno. As mentioned several times, he has full understanding and access to all of the Omniverse, so he's quickly able to reassemble himself piece by piece. Although he isn't dead, he's extremely weak. The Foundation and Jones make their way back to Reality Zero. With victory finally in the hands of the Seven, a party celebrating the win commences on the island, and the 0 point is finally set free. It grows itself into a reality tree and sits as a seed in the center. It is now free to open up to any universe, allowing for a diverse community within this island, which you'd assume would be a good thing. Yeah, as if. The 0 point is now more susceptible than ever, and it begins to send warnings to loopers of what's to come, but they're also distress signals. Various relics teasing Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and even the Ice King are spotted around the island, and with each object arriving to the island, a massive shockwave occurs. As the Seven are studying these shockwaves, they begin to realize the lack of communication within their group. Origin isn't giving any orders, Foundation isn't answering calls. The Seven begin to get extremely concerned by all of this, as there are now only 2 of them remaining alongside a droid named Amy in which the scientist built. With only the scientist and the Paradigm remaining, it turns out that one of them somewhat understood what was going on. The scientist was actually secretly hiding away in an underground bunker with the Visitor as well as the Origin, studying a chrome-like substance spreading fast. It was said to have been there before in the island's spire-like structures. Paradigm attempts to go down to help them, but the chrome is too complex for her to understand and take down, and as the Seven are literally consumed by it, she escapes and travels through the 0 point in an attempt to get away. But what is truly going on here? It's really confusing right now, but as usual, I'm sure it'll all tie together, adding to the ever-expansive narrative of Fortnite.